Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Tim Samus and I am a Salesforce administrator. And in today's video, we are going to be doing a simple Salesforce flow. And we're going to be doing it together. This way you will have the courage and the knowledge in knowing how to do one. But before we can get started, you will need a Salesforce developer org. I will be putting one in the description for you, and I will see you in there. Okay, so here we are in our Salesforce org. And the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to go into Setup. So we're going to click the gear icon right here. And we're going to click Setup. And then oh, that was fast. Usually Salesforce likes taking its time. But in the quick find box right here, we are going to type in flow. And then flows should pop up. This is the one we want, flows. And then as you can see, we have a lot of different types of flows. Or these are flow templates. But the one that we want is we want to create a new flow. So we are going to click New Flow. And we're going to let it think again. And as you can see, we have a lot of different types of flows. We have triggered flows, scheduled flows, screen flows, auto launch flows, many different types of flows. But the one that we want is we want a screen flow. So we're going to click screen flow. And then something new that Salesforce is doing is they're having different types of flows inside flows for whatever reason. But what we want is we want the classic screen flow. So we're going to click screen flow. And then right here where it says auto launch, we don't want auto launch. Auto launch is basically things just snap together. You click an element and it snaps together. But the one that we want is we want freeform. What is freeform? Freeform is basically where we can drag and drop the items where we want it. We create our own map, in other words. So what we're going to be doing is we are going to create a flow that will capture information from a user. And then we're going to search the Salesforce org for a record that matches what the user has entered. And what they'll be entering is the first and last name of a contact. If an existing contact record exists, then there's a decision to be made. And that decision is, do we update or not update an existing contact record? Or do we create a new contact record entirely? And the final thing to do is update the record or create a new record. Okay, so those are the steps. So let's begin. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to grab a screen element. And that is going to be found in the toolbox, which is right here. And down below it, you're going to see two tabs. You're going to see the Elements tab and the Manager tab. But we want to be in the Elements tab. And the element that we want to grab is the screen element. So we're going to grab, and we're going to drag that onto here. And up is going to pop a window. And we're going to need to name it. So the name is basically what they call the label. And we're going to name it the contact info screen. Beautiful. And then you're going to hit tab and you're going to get what they call an API name. An API name is basically the system name, what's in the background. And then you're going to have a bunch of other stuff over here. You can give it a description if you want to. And just to keep it simple, we're just going to keep this at the default. Move my face. And we're going to click done. So basically what we just did is we created a template. And what we're going to want to do now is we're going to want to connect the start to the screen element. So they call this a node. So we're going to connect that node to the screen. And then the next thing we're going to want to do is we are going to want to save it. And we're going to call this, we are going to call it new contact. New contact. Hit the tab. Again, you can give a description if you wanted to. Some advanced features, but again, we're going to keep it simple. Awesome. So now that we have our string element, the next thing we're going to need is we're going to need a variable. What is a variable in Salesforce? A variable is essentially a placeholder, a box, a table that we can store information into that is entered into our string. So this variable will store information that is entered into this flow. And later, we will decide what to do with that information. Will we create a new record? Or we could update an existing record. Okay, so the next thing that we want is we want a variable. So we're going to go back to our toolbox and we are going to select Manager. And from Manager, we are going to select New Resource. So when we click New Resource, it's going to ask us what resource type we want. And the resource type we want is a variable. So now it's going to ask us, what do we want the API name? So we are going to name this contact variable. Pretty straightforward. Again, you can put a description there if you want. And so now it's asking us what we want the data type to be. So for us, we want a record. This way, when we're doing our variable, it will go search for a record, and that record will have all the fields from a certain object, all that information. And that's pretty much the next question. It's going to ask us for an object. And obviously, we want that object to be a contact. So let's type contact in here. And the contact we want is the classic contact. So let's click done. And we will click save. We always want to save. All right, there it is. Awesome. So what we need to do next is we need to create our element that will allow our user to input the first and last name. So in order to do that, we need to go into the string element. So we're going to double click that. And as you can see, there's no information here. So in order to put information in there, we need to go to search components and we are going to type in name. And we're going to drag and drop name right under new contact. So now we have a form element. And the next thing that we need to do is we need to give it a name. And we got a good name. We're going to name it contact name. Awesome. So now what we need to do is we need to go down to advanced. And the reason we're going down to advanced is we don't want this to be a constant value, something we just hard code. And we don't want it to be a new resource either, such as a variable where information would just pre-populate in here. We don't want that. We want our user to manually type in the user's, the contact's name. So I'm going to move my face and we're going to click advanced. And from here, we are going to click manually assign variables. And we're going to check that. And so now we got all these fields. And the one that we want is first name. So what we're doing here is when the user manually types in the contact's information, what do we do with that information? So where do we store it, in other words? So we want them to store it in the contact variable. And basically, what field, what object? And we type in first name. So now, once this information is stored inside our variable, later when we go to do our search in our database, we can then use this information to see if a contact record exists or not. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to do one for last name. So let's go to the last name real quick. It's going to be the same exact thing, except we are going to choose last name. So we'll type in last, and there it is. So everything looks good here. We're going to click done, and then we are going to save it. Great. Next thing we need to do is we need to add a pick list for a list of accounts in the org. We need to do this because if the user only uses the first and last name as the only pieces of information to search for the contact record, there could be a gazillion John and Jane Does. So what we are going to do is we are going to add an additional piece of information, and that will be a list of accounts. Now, in order to do that, what we need to do is we need to go into the Manager tab. So we're going to click that, and we are going to go into New Resource. All right. So now we need to select a new resource type. And the one that we want is we want the record choice set. It's kind of a strange name for it, but think of it as a record pick list set. For the API name, we're going to name it account pick list. Okay. You can put a description there if you want. And the object that we want is going to be account, because that's where we're going to be pulling the records from. Okay. Okay, so for filter account records, for condition requirements, we want none. We want to get all the records. For sort order, we're not going to worry about this, but these are the choices that you can pick from. Maximum number of choices. This helps you when you're trying to filter it out, how many, that we don't get too many records. Now for configure each choice. For each record in the collection, the flow creates a choice using values from that record. So what does that mean? It means that for each record that meets the filter conditions, which we have none, the flow creates a choice using values from the record. In this case, we are looking at the account object, and so we are choosing a field to show us the choice or the pick list drop-down label. In other words, what we want displayed. And so now what we need to do is we need to choose a choice label and a choice value. So what's the difference between these two? Well, the choice label is going to be the one that you see, and the choice value is going to be the information in the background. So the choice label that we want is the account name. So we can just type in account name, or type in name, and account name will pop up. For data type, for this, we want text. Now, for the account value, we want account ID. So we can just type in account ID, and there it is right there. Because you could have a lot of account names. You could have a lot of John Does. But there only will be one single account ID. So that's what we want for this. So in this last section here, store more account field values, what this is telling us is cool. You selected an account. You capture the ID of an account. What do you want to do with it? And what we want to do with it is we want to store it in our contact variable that's housing our first and last name. And so how we do that is we go to field and we're going to type in ID because we want the account ID in our contact variable. So this one right here, ID, account ID. And then the variable that we want is the one we've been using, which is the contact variable. And then it's going to tell us to select a field. And the field that we want is the account ID. Okay, so now we're going to select done. And we're going to save it. Now what we're going to do is we need to create a pick list for our string element. So let's click on our string element. And from here, we're going to go into the search components. And we are going to type in pick list. And we want this one right here, the classic pick list. And we're going to drag and drop that right under new contact. There we go. And I'll move my face real quick. Okay. And we will name it, for the label, we will name it accounts list. Perfect. Hit tab or click it. And then for data type, we want text. And for the choice, we want that account pick list we just created. All right, everything looks good. We don't need a default value. Can't really do it. And we're going to click done. And we're going to save it. Awesome. And what we're going to be doing next is we're going to be going back into our string element. So we're going to click that. And we're going to be adding a little bit more complexity to it. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding a toggle. And a toggle acts as a sort of switch, an off on, true or false. Almost acts like a checkbox, but it's a switch. So we're going to go and search components and we're going to type in toggle. And we're going to drag and drop that in there. And for the API name, we are going to name it update toggle. Okay. For the label, I want us to be descriptive. So I am going to type in, if the contact already exists, update the existing contact record. So what we are doing here is we are allowing our user to make a decision. We are allowing them to say, yes, when I move to the next phase, I want you to update the contact record that's already there. I don't want you creating any duplicates. Now, if they turn the toggle off and they want to create a new record, we want to allow the user to do that too. Active label. So what is an active label? An active label is going to be what shows up when you turn it on. So that's going to be the description that's going to be shown. And we are going to name it update existing. Okay. And for disabled, we are going to skip that. And for inactive label, that's what's going to show up when we turn the toggle off. We are going to put create new contact. There we go. So we're going to skip all this and we're going to click done. And sometimes you'll have to reload it or refresh it. And we'll wait patiently. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go over to run to see the work we've done. And as you can see, we get the first and last name. Looks good. Got the account list. Accounts are popping up. Looks great. And we've got that toggle. And as you can see, when it's off, it says create new contact. And when it's on, it says update existing. So we're not going to run the flow right now because it's not complete. So we're going to exit out of this. And what we need to do next is we need a way to search and see if there's any records in there in the first place. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to go to Get Records. We're going to grab the Get Records element. And for the label, we will put in Find a Match. Tab. Then we're going to go down to Object, and we want Contact. And the contact that we want is the classic contact. Okay, and so this expands, and the next section is Filter Contact Records. And so we do need to filter the records because we are looking for a specific record. And what we're looking for is one that matches the first and last name. So we will go to Field, and we will type in first and we will click first name, and we want it to equal, and the value that we want it to equal is the contact variable, the one that has all that information in it. So once you click on contact variable, it's going to say, well, which field do you want it to match? And we want first name. And then we want it to match a second criteria. We want it to match the last name. So we'll type in last, and we will click in last name. We want it to equal, and the same thing as the last. We want contact, but this time, instead of first name, we want last name. There we go. And then for the condition requirements, we want both these to be matched. So we want all conditions are met and. So we'll keep that the same. And we will click done. The next thing that we need to do is we need to grab the node from the screen element to the get records element. And we will click save. And you should save it. So we have our screen element right here, and the user is going to be entering the information, and it is going to go down into the get records element, and it's going to search for the records that match the information that the user has put in. Our next step is to create a decision. Do we want to update an existing contact record, or do we want to create a new one entirely? And the way we do this is we go to our toolbox and we grab the decision element and drag it onto the canvas. And we will label it update or create. The next thing we want to do is we want to go to outcomes. And it says new outcome here because we haven't put a label. And so we are going to name it update existing. Okay, and to force it down this path, what we need to do is we need to go down to condition requirements. And the first condition we want is we want the toggle. So we're going to type in toggle. There we are. And it is a value, so we're going to select value. We want equals, and we want that to be true. So what this is saying is if the toggle is turned on, then they want to update an existing record. And so for our second condition, we want to hit add condition. And for resource, we want find a match that we created. There we go. And we don't need a field. And for the operator we want is null, which means there's nothing in that table. And we want the value to be false. So what we're saying here is there's something in that table false, meaning there's something in that table. So if both these conditions are true, we know for a fact we're going to be updating an existing record. Now for our second outcome, we're going to go to default outcome, and it's called default outcome because we haven't named it yet. And we are going to name it create new contact. Okay, click done. There we go. And we are going to connect the node. And we are going to save it. Okay, now that's saved, we are going to go and we got to create the paths for the decision. So we are going to grab create new records, and we are going to name it create new contact. Hit tab. Okay. How to set record field value? How to set record field values from a record variable? Yes. How many records to create? Just one. And the record that we want is the contact variable. That's the one that's got the first name, last name, and the account ID. And we will click done. And we'll attach the node. And then it's going to ask us which outcome do we want. And because this is a create new records outcome, we want the create new records contact. So what we need to do next is we need to create our second path. But before we can do that, we need to create an assignment element. So why are we doing this? We are doing this because in our table that we created, we got our first name, last name, and our account pick list. But in this situation, it's found in an existing contact record. So what we want to do is we want to update that existing contact record. But in order to do that, we need to store that contact record ID inside our contact variable. Let's get our assignment element. We'll drag and drop that in there. And we will name it set contact ID. Then for our variable, we want the contact variable that has all of our information in it. And the field we want, we'll type in ID, is the contact ID. And we want that to equal the find a match element. And the field we want is the contact ID again. So we'll type in ID. And it's right there. And we will click done. Move that a little bit. We'll connect the node. All right. Now we can start our second path. So the path works like this. It's going to go, okay, that contact ID we found in find a match get records, we are now going to go down this flow, this path, and we are going to populate it into the contact variable. Now, our contact variable has all this information. What do we want to do with it? Well, we want to update an existing record. So we are going to get the update records element, and we're going to drag and drop that in there. And we want to name it update existing contact record. And how to find records to update and set their values. This is exactly what we want to use right here. We want to use the IDs and all field values from a record or record collection. And we're going to get that from our contact variable. So we are going to click done. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to connect our node. And we are going to click save. So you've done it. You've created your simple Salesforce flow. Now you have the foundational knowledge to create other flows and other processes, and you can go on to more complicated ones. So what we can do now is we can go to run or debug. And run is going to run it through its process. And debug is going to show you if there's something missing, or it's going to give you a log of what you've done. So let's click run. And there it is. You see all the stuff we've done. And here's the debug log over here. And let's test it out. So we are going to type in Elmer Fudd. And we'll put him in Edge Communications. And we want to create a new flow, create a new contact. Okay, So you can see over here that we've got our debug log. Now let's go into our instance. So we might have to refresh it. So we'll click refresh. And we will go into our sales console. Perfect. And we're going to look for Mr. Fudd. I think I saw him. Get rid of these pop-ups. Elmer Fudd. There he is. Elmer Fudd of Edge Communications. So as you can see, our Salesforce Flow worked. It created a new contact of Elmer Fudd. He is now in there, and he is a new contact. All right. So that does it for our video today. If you found it useful, please feel free to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification. Once again, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next.